Hello, everyone, and happy Saturday. I am so excited to have on LaKesha and Friends, not only one of my friends, but most of you probably don't know this, but my cousin, T.O. Burnett. And he is not only a police officer, which we are going to get into that a little bit later, but he is one of the most dynamic writers that I know. And I know a lot of writers, but I am not into science fiction, but this man can write a science fiction story that keeps me captivated. So first I want you to introduce yourself, but then we're going to jump into our discussion for today.
Oh, hello everyone. It's T.O. Burnett. Please excuse the fact that I misspelled my own name at the last thing right there and left off the last T, but mistakes happen. All right. I am a science fiction author. I've written two books in my Sapien series, the first being Sapien Dawn of Oblivion, the second being Sapien Dawn Days of Deception. I'm currently 2/3 of the way through the series finale of that, the third and final book. The yet to be subtitled third installment of the Sapien series. Um, Among other things, I writing one of the things that I love to do, and Sapien has a lot of plot lines that overlap and bring it to a lot of things, mimic and mirror what is going on in society today, with a little exciting touches here and some mild sci-fi touches to go along with that. Um, that's as far as that. Basically, what I do that I love. And I'm also working on a dystopian novel at the same time as that I'm writing the third installment of that. So that's pretty interesting, and I think that's a very book as well. And I can't wait to bring that to you all. So there's some good things to come. There's some good things to come. I have a military background, which and I'm also a combat veteran, which contributes to the authenticity of the fight scenes that I create. And as she mentioned, I'm currently a law enforcement officer. I also train police officers. I'm a certified personal. I'm a firearms instructor, and I do a lot of things, a jack of many trades.
Yes, you definitely are. So I want to talk, definitely about the book, but I guess let's start with you being a Leo, as some people call you guys, a law enforcement officer. And right now, we see a lot of this craziness when it comes to police brutality. And considering you train police officers, can you help us just to understand that training is not the issue with a lot of the brutality that we see?
Um, I'm assuming you finished because it cut off. So one of the things that we do um, in our training is, given the current climate, a tactic that I've gone to is taking popular stories or stories that are trending and reviewing the cases with the officers to be the student officers. And what we do look at cases and whether or not the officer was exonerated. And most times the officer was exonerated in whatever um, uh, incident that occurred. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that the officer was right.
Right.
And so what we do is, despite the fact that the officer was indicted, swayed them, closed in environment, and we always take all of the political stuff out of it, and we look at the incident in and of itself, and we take that specifically and we show the student officers where the officers went wrong. All right, and why what they did was wrong, if they were in fact wrong, despite what the court said the outcome was. Because listen, there are a lot of things that are legal that are not right, and told us that. So even working from that mindset, we look at it and we say, just because someone was exonerated doesn't necessarily mean that what their actions were either legal or ethical or lawful a lot of times. And a lot of times whether the officer is acquitted depends on the demographics of the locale in which the incident occurred. So so if you're an officer and you commit a crime or you do have an infraction in a predominant black, there's a good chance that you're going to be convicted. If you're a black officer and you commit an infraction in a predominantly white community, there's a good chance that you'll be convicted. If you're a white officer in an infraction in a predominantly white community, there's a good chance you'll be exonerated, and so on and so forth. It's kind of sort of 50-50 with black officers in black communities, because oftentimes, and I can speak from experience with this, we're seen as sellouts and all that other stuff and things of that nature. And the community looks at themselves, whether they understand the word or not, as the proletariat, to borrow a word from 1984. And they look at the other side as the establishment. We as officers represent the establishment. So they see that first. And it's hard for them to separate the fact that I am a black man just like you're a black man, and we have that problem. Often ask citizens who try to put that moniker on me and sell out Uncle Tom or whatever, that you had an all-white police force.
Right. And I think that is so important, that we do have diversity in our law enforcement. However, there is like a lack of interest, like you said, in more minorities joining the force because they don't want to be seen as sellouts. So, and I think that how this connects to voting, because I know some people are like, this is supposed to be about rethinking voting, but I think that it goes to us being involved in the system and in the process. And so when you don't have more minorities who want to be police officers, then it makes community policing in our communities more difficult because you don't have representation. So what do you say to people who are like, oh, police officers are sellouts if they're, minorities, whereas we need them to be a part of the force?
What I say to them is stay encouraged. And also the idea that don't want to be in law enforcement is kind of sort of a piece of propaganda as well, not from you, but from the people who are doing the hiring. And what happens with that is there's certain things. Polygraphs are absolutely effective, despite what people tell you. Yes, they can be beaten, but they are very effective, and they're very good at bringing out the truth or lies, so to speak. And that is the now we have voice stress analyzers as well that are used to do that. However, but the point I'm trying to make here is of the disqualifiers for potential law enforcement officers. That's where the discrimination comes into place. It's not so much focused on have you ever said the word nigger? Have you ever referred to a black person as nigger? Would you arrest a person simply because they're black? We know those questions, don't come up in a thing. But have you ever smoked a joint? Have you if they're a drug dealer in your house, do you hang around drug dealers and all that stuff? If you're black and you grew up in a black neighborhood, then guess what? For 90% of us, that's going to be true. So therein lies the problem. Most police forces in urban areas consist of from New York, Pennsylvania, and places like that, imported in here to become police officers. I'm speaking specifically about Maryland, where I police. And what happens is with all those other factors that I spoke of, you take young, aggressive white males and put them on the streets in direct opposition to young, aggressive black males, they're going to win the encounter.
Right.
All right. So at that point in time, it becomes, an idea of I'm not going to capitulate to your will, and you're not going to capitulate to my will, and that's where the bone of contention lies. If we had more people who, so to speak, reflected the demographics of the community they police, then some of that can be mitigated, I do believe. And I think it starts in the hiring process, and the hiring process needs to start with the vetting process, and the vetting process needs to lean more to the benefit of the doubt of the people who reflect the community as opposed to skepticism.
That makes total sense. So what how do you make the connection between like our need to vote and how that influences the police departments? Because I know in some cities the police chief is hired by the mayor, but people don't make the connection between who you vote for as your mayor and their value system with the value system that your police department is ultimately going to have. So how do you have that conversation with people?
That is a very good question, because that is the most grassroots of grassroots level of the whole process. And so many times we elect mayors and city council members based on punchlines, catchlines, and things of that nature instead of substance. What we need to focus on is their plan for the community, uh, their vision, whether or not they're going to hire somebody who's just a retread. Most of these chiefs that are hired are 60, 70, 80 years old, fit a certain demographic, are not high energy people, and very anachronistic in their ways, in their beliefs. All right. And what happens when you have people in an ever evolving society, there's going to be a clash. There's going to be a clash. And one of the most cringeworthy things I hear is when somebody says, I'm old school. I believe in doing things the old way. Well, you know what? The old school is old school for a reason.
Right.
It went the way of the dinosaur. Evolve, and just I'm not resistant to change. I embrace change as much as I hate learning new things that force me to expand my mind. I know that it's necessary, not a necessary evil, it's a necessary good. And
Right.
and I know that the people in charge don't have that mindset. We're often nostalgic about the wrong things, because when we look at the root of the things that we're nostalgic about, then you have to realize that it's based most times in evil doctrine.
Ooh. So I have to ask, because as a law enforcement officer, when you hear the word defunding the police, how is that internalized on your end? Because I hear a lot of civilians and people who are not involved in policing at any level, saying, oh, we need to defund the police and we need to, restructure the police department. Is that really the solution? Is that what you feel from your side that we need to do?
For different definitions of what defunding the police actually means, or two different understandings of it. On the one hand, it's people saying take money away from the police altogether, get rid of the police. And on the other hand, people are saying no, we're not saying take get rid of the police departments. We're saying allocate the funds to other places that could better benefit the community at large. So when I hear say defund the police, it doesn't bother me per se. because well, first of all, the police are never going anywhere. The society, we need the police.
We do.
You know, there's some evil people out here, despite, you know, the way all the negative stuff that these officers they're officers who have done some terrible things. There are some bad people out here, bad citizens from whom the rest of the citizens need to be protected.
Right.
You know, I'll often say that as citizens, we walk through life and like it's a park. There may be a stream. We walk through the stream barefooted. All right. Our job as police officers is to walk through that same creek, stream, or whatever, and flip the rocks over. All right. And once you flip the rocks over, you see all the things that are under there hazardous to the people who are obliviously walking through life.
Right.
And that where we as police officers get in trouble is when we go beyond flipping over the rocks and getting everything that's on the surface, when we start shovels and digging further into the ground to find things. All right. In other words, you know, stay in your lane. The saying that goes, a community will get the police that they deserve. And on the surface, that seems like a very harsh statement, but when you really dig into it and you really think about it, it's very true. It's very true in many ways. In many ways. And I find that, you know, part of the things that we face, and this is how I tie it into voting, because I'll politicians make decisions that affect levels.
Right.
All right. For instance, you know, you may have a community where they say, we'll say Section 8, and somebody somewhere makes a decision to open up an apartment complex that is known for housing Section 8 people. Now, in that community, every apartment consists of a single mother and children. All right. The one of the rules there is that the mother can have a man property or live in the home. All right. That's deconstructing the family. Right. What they're discounting is that whether she's on Section 8 or not, she still wants nice things.
Right.
She still wants to live in a lifestyle that's gonna that she's proud of. So she's gonna want some income that's gonna be able to support that. What happens? Here come the drug boys. Now we have drug boys up in the community. It's an open air drug strip. The vicious cycle continues because the kids and there's lies there that normal kids should not be exposed to: murder,
Right.
drugs, prostitution, theft, carjackings, all of the things that go along with that. Whereas on the flip side, if we say, okay, you know, we'll make this a regular apartment complex, we're not going to make it 100% Section 8 or whatever like that, and we will make the government do its job and communities where the community will bring the individual up instead of the individuals bringing the community down. From a rising tide floats all ships point, right? And just over the 15 years that I've been in law enforcement and my first 14 years of my life being on welfare myself, that's some of the things that I was, you know, able to observe, and it's been ingrained in my own mind, and just the observations.
Right.
That is a direct result of the governance of the community from the politicians. We have the ability as voters to change that, to put people in there who are going to come in there, at least try something different. Put people in place who have an idea to say, you know what, this has been going on for the last 60 years. You know, to some it may be working, to some but you know, let's try something different.
Yeah, and I think that we definitely need to do a show on welfare reform, because I don't think a lot of people who have not been on the system or in the system really understand how the parameters around welfare keep people in the system. So like when you can only make a certain amount of income, when you can't have a male in the house, like people who aren't a part of the system don't understand how those rules or regulations contribute to people remaining like in that system. So you're going to come back and we're going to have a whole conversation about that. But before we go, like I definitely want to talk about your books, because I'm not like a science fiction fan. However, when I read your work, like it just has me like captivated. And I was thinking as you were coming on, like how much of just like the craziness that you write about or that you have written about is really like become a reality for us, like art imitating life or life imitating art. I don't know like which direction that goes in, but just like tell us a little bit about like how you come up with like these scenes, because another thing is like you don't see a lot of Black men who write science fiction. Like that's like, let's just go there as well. Like, and that's just like so fascinating to me that that's like the genre that you chose to write about. But how do you come up with these things, and like how do you see like what's happening today? Like, wow, I never would have guessed this would be like our reality.
Right, that's a very good question. And to answer the latter first, as a I've always been a fan of science fiction. You know, it's something that just resonates with me. Um, Kind of in the same way that you know you have rappers who rap about gangster stuff but never lived the gangster lifestyle. It's not necessarily that they are trying to fit. It's really more so that that's what their pen loves. My pen loves
Mm,
science fiction. My mind is geared towards science fiction. I couldn't write a children's book to save my life. I couldn't write a romance novel to save my life. I couldn't write a number of things to save my life, but science fiction, I could write. It to me, from my perspective, is one of the easiest things to write because the rules are the rules established by the author for the most
right,
part. The world can be as expansive or as limited as you choose to make it, and that's all according to your imagination. Now, you have to have some intelligence. Let's not get it twisted, because the things have to make sense. And I call it the timeline mathematics has to add up. You
right.
know, and so and as far as it relating to today, we were talking earlier. Our existence is very much Orwellian at the moment. Um, um, if people haven't read 1984, I beg them to go out there and read that, because it is so eye-opening in the way that it lays out how society actually works and what it does. I was it kind of mirrored what I was thinking about society quietly, because so far that you think else could think that it's set up that way as well. But when you read it in black and white, it's affirmation. Um, However, I did read 1984 after I wrote. Can't really say that I was influenced by it when I was writing those exactly. So, but in relation to Sapien, and I'll just give a little hint as to what the story is about, and that it's the setting of the book, as you well know already, is where there's no religion and no justice system, and what we have is an authoritarian who leads the Supreme Council, and Chancellor Stephen Aldrich, who decides somewhat arbitrarily that the rest of the solar system needs to be on the same page as the cosmopolitan neutralia. And so doing, although he has noble aspirations and he wants the entire solar system to be a utopia, his ways of going about that are very questionable, and he employs some barbaric techniques in doing so. So much, in creating a prison system and all that stuff, and which was foreign to the people of the sapient solar system, which causes a whole lot of turmoil. There's a lot of backbiting, political infighting with one of the other major antagonists, Judas Benedict, and that lot for people. And as it relates to our society, you see different forms of government in different characters. One has a democratic mindset, another a socialist mindset, and another a communist mindset. And I pretty much did that on purpose for the triumvirate of politicians in there. That was a subtle thing. You might have missed that.
I did not. Like now, my mind
did that
is
on purpose to have that. Right. And so what it is, and so naturally there's a lot of empathy between them because of that. Now, they don't know that they're a socialist and a Democrat. There's no such label been invented just yet in the story. But people looking at it can say, okay, well, I can see that. And the protagonist, is not necessarily a good guy, but he's good because he has noble aspirations as well. And however, he listens. And let me backtrack for a second, because an important element that I'm missing is that the fact that they don't have a religion is replaced by adherence to their conscience by each person, each self-aware being. So every person believes that they're governed. And so they believe that they are allowed to do what their conscience permits. And if they go against their conscience, whatever internal strife they feel as a result is the punishment they deserve. You kill somebody, that lasts for a time. You steal something that you stole in that last year or two. Appropriate to the infraction. And so my protagonist is hired by one of the politicians, the more democratic of the three, and to carry out a mission that is pretty much designed to not save the solar system, but to bring the mentality of the politician to another place where that life can begin anew. And surprise, surprise, that place is Earth eventually. And so they're supposed to be our forefathers, our ancestors. And so within that, there's a lot of excitement, a lot of danger, a lot of intrigue, activity. Yes. And all of the above. And it's a very exciting story.
It is. And if you guys have not read Sapien, you definitely need to get it, because we are hoping for the third book in the trilogy to be released somewhere after the holidays or somewhere around there. So definitely start reading 1 and 2. It's a great book for your kids also. Like my 14-year-old loved reading the books. So if you're looking for something for your kids to read, like, it's excellent. And it does kind of help you to understand politics and a lot of the just like underbelly of this whole world. So great work. Before we go, because I know you have a lot of stuff to do today, and so I just really thank you for taking time out of your Saturday to be on with us. What advice do you give to people who maybe, in that population where they're just like, my vote doesn't count, I've been marginalized, the system doesn't work for me? What do you say to those people to encourage them that they need to become more active and they need to vote in the upcoming election?
It's your duty. Um, and if you don't feel the need to vote, I want you to look at a couple things. Number one, 14th and 15th Amendment, the 19th Amendment, and look at all the fights and the battles people who wanted to vote had to go to gain the right to vote.
Right.
The country is based on the idea that one demographic, white males, should have the right to vote. These are the only ones who will automatically have the right, no matter what. No matter if the laws ever change, period, they have the right to vote. They don't think for everybody, as we know. Should they have the right to vote? Absolutely, they do. But everybody else deserves an equal right to vote.
Right.
Now, now that we all have the right to vote, look at all the ways that they're trying to keep you from voting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all the forms of voter suppression. You know, eliminating polling places, making it more difficult to vote in simpler ways, gerrymandering, all types of things. And you're gonna get me on my soapbox before I leave, but the some of the things that I would like to see is, number one, first and foremost, either you put voting on a Saturday, or you make voting, the national election, a national holiday. Number one. Two, I like college go dinosaur. I like to get rid of that. I like to have all the primary elections on one day, because what happens is they front load the primaries of Iowa and New Hampshire on the front side, and not to take anything away from those states, but they're white. They're very white. So if you go into into those primaries, then that, as a black person, you have to compromise yourself, your blackness, to do whatever it is to gain those votes. Right? By that time you've already damaged yourself.
Right.
All right. And all the white person has to do is come to the black church and say, I don't feel no ways tied. And the black people stand up and say, oh, she down, she down. Next thing you know, they got their vote, and you've been hooked again.
Right.
You know, it's funny, but it's true. And, you know, so all the primary elections on the same day. That way, you know, get that out the way. The person that rises, you know, and you can platform from wherever you are. You don't have to go from state to state. All that stuff, stomping here and stomping there. That was way back when the internet didn't exist. We don't need to do that anymore. You don't need to go and shake the hands of and make deals with slimy politicians in Chicago, you know, to gain access to here. And it doesn't happen that way anymore. That thing has gone the way of the dinosaur. Also, are able to register to vote online, then we should be able to vote online.
Mm-hmm.
If we're worried about the system being jammed up, we can do it by alphabet. The first, you know, divided up into 4 days or whatever, and have if A through, you know, D vote, E through, you know, whatever, vote the next day. And that way we don't bog the system down. The votes are tallied within minutes on the election day, and we have.
Well, I think those are some very great ideas, and I have a feeling we're going to be having this conversation more, especially as we continue to rethink voting, because like you said, like there's so many aspects of our system that we have just continued to pass along just because it's the way we've always done it, without taking a critical evaluation of like, does this really work? So thank you guys for tuning in on your Saturday. Thank you to my cousin and my good friend, T.O. Burnett, for being with us today to have like this conversation from a law enforcement perspective and from a science fiction author, because I'm just like always curious about how his mind works, because it's just absolutely fascinating to me. So thank you again for being on today.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you.